So right off the bat, when you're getting into the server, you have these two shortcut folders on the main desktop, Power Operation and Advanced Reports. So those two folders get you access to the back end shortcuts of all the applications to administer the system. I've made some shortcuts on the taskbar down below, just because those are the ones that I want to access readily available, and so I don't have to dive into those folders all the time. But when it comes to needing to do things, sometimes I need to go into one of these applications to fix something, to tweak something, to enable something, to make it work. So the main application to start with, and sort of your, let's say, management console level application, if you know from PME side, management console was the sort of main admin application that you could launch other applications from. You could get access to certain tools. You could see all your devices and things like that, connections. The main application on the Power Operations side is called the Power Operations Studio. That's this one right here. And that's I've launched it. It looks like an electrical plug, the icon. Okay, some of these will touch from, you can launch some of these other applications from the studio, and just like tools menu, in management console, similar to that. And some you still have to come, and they've made shortcuts to them as well from this folder. So I like to have the folder because it's all in one place. Whereas in the studio, you do have to know where it is in the studio. But this is what it looks like when you open it up. It starts you off in the projects folder. There's a list of tabs there's a list of icons on the left-hand side here, and sort of tabs going across the top. The icons on the left-hand side get you into deeper and deeper into your project. So from the project level, this is managing a project, and this is how you do a backup. This is where you want to do a backup, or if you want to restore a project from another, from a backup, or if I give a project to another team member, I can pass a project this way quite easily from one studio to another, which is nice. So you'll see some other things here that I have listed. These are other projects that I've taken some resources from. We'll clean this up once we hand this off to you officially. But yeah, I have some other projects in the back end that they're not live. You can see the active project. It's labeled here. When you click on another project, you can say make active, and that's going to allow you to then start to make active. And actually, making active doesn't change the runtime. So there's two components to managing a project and actually making it live and what you're doing. And the runtime is the thing that's actually running in the background like a service, and that is the thing that's running right now, which is your hosted project. So even if I go and make a project active here, that's just for me to manage things in the back end still. Just so you know, there's a disconnect between the two.
So are you saying make active means I could play around with the project to see how it functions, but doesn't actually deploy?
Yes, correct. Yes. You haven't yet compiled, so there's a check mark there for compile. If I make an active project, another project. So like for example, over here, I can make this test active. I didn't change anything. All I did was so now when I launch the graphics editor, for example, it's going to relate to that active project.
Gotcha.
And the TGML graphics within that folder. So you can see all the folder references here on the right hand side. These are, and they're basically underneath this user folder, and then each project has its own little folder. All of the graphic material and sort of reference material inside those projects are within those folders. So that's what we're making active, essentially. We're telling the studio, go here for all your stuff. So go back to that. What else I want to talk about? Yeah, backups and restores. So we'll get into that in a sec. Okay, yeah, a little bit more about the studio and how it looks right now. So there's another tab at the top here called Includes, and you'll see that there's a thing that's in the back end that you can see if you click on this. It'll show you all the things that are inside of the project. There's a thing called PLS Includes, Power SCADA Includes project, which basically a Power Operation Include. It's like a side project it's a templates of a project that includes a lot of templates. So it's always something that we want to include usually in your in the Power SCADA project, Power Operation project. And I'll get into that folder so you can see what I mean in a sec here. So here's that user folder and all of those various projects that we see in the studio. Okay. So when we restore a project in the studio, we are restoring basically a whole bunch of that stuff, and it just shoots all that stuff like you're unzipping a folder, kind of just shoots everything into these folders. So this is the folder for this project, and in terms of includes, there's this PLS includes project, which is a side project back up at the user level, but it's included in this project. So basically Studio and the way that it's working, it understands that it has both things to reference, is what basically we've told it. Because there's a lot of templates and things like that that we like in that project. There's a button that you can also just open straight in Explorer. So if you ever need to access it quickly, it's the easy way to do it. Right here at the top. We'll get into some of these applications in a sec. Migration tool, not really, we won't touch on that. But power applications. Yeah. And so backing up and restoring, let's just briefly touch on that. So backing up, it's super easy. It's simply just pressing the backup button. It will start the little wizard that asks you for a couple of things to just tell it, do you want to use encryption? Do you want to save the compiled as part of it? So if you're ever restoring, it basically includes the compiled. I don't typically check that. I just always like to recompile when you're starting to run the project. You can include the includes. So basically that's a big handoff that allows you to include those included projects. That's what that checkbox does. Here's, it's obviously the list of the 5 that you see here. We're able to back up. And then you can name it. So here we have a whole bunch, because I've versioned it several times. So after I've done some fixes, and this is an easy way to restore if we need to go back in time, and maybe we broke something that is no longer working in this new version, and we need to roll back a day or something like that.
So I'm assuming it's good practice anytime I'm picking around with the project, like fiddling with it, maybe adding something, editing something, I should back up first.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, maybe there's two ways to approach that. You can do, because if you can just check if you have a backup from previous, but also it's a start of the day, end of the day type thing. If you want to think about it like that, that's sometimes what I've done when I know I'm going through a day of uh, doing some updates and doing a lot of updates that might change the project in ways that I don't know. I'll do a backup at the start of the day and the end of the day, like here, for example. And I went through a bunch of things to change the project, and then I did an end of day, type of thing. As completes end of days. These were some backups that yeah I didn't do, but yeah, just putting your and also putting your own little description on it really can help going back in time if you ever wondered what you were doing and that. So yeah, and there's no limitation to the name as well. You can just give it a name with a date. It's merely, this is really like a zip file, okay? So you can kind of think about it like that. Um, that houses a whole bunch of all the project resources. Um, and they're not that big, it's 25 megabytes. I've gotten some that are, into the hundreds, depending on how much is there inside of it. But still, pretty manageable in terms of a backup. It's not taking the database now. So if you want to think about an entire system backup, that would involve doing the SQL database as well. But in terms of the graphics that we're going to talk about and the devices, the tags that we're viewing and things like that, that's really the anything to do with the runtime that is running the project right now, that's what we're backing up. Um, the PME side does have the database, which is always growing on the SQL side. And that case, we would have to make sure that there's SQL backups running accordingly on the side. That I think you guys use IT to manage, right? Is that the case, Richard? Does IT
IT does all of our database
take take
management.
care
Yep.
take care of database management? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right, so I'm just gonna do one here, just so that we can say we just to practice. Okay, and I'll just leave these checked as it is. Say okay. Watch it do its thing. Sweet. Okay, great. Let's just go to it. That folder here. There it is. Yeah, 25 megabytes. Okay, let's go. I want to show a bit about navigating this entire studio. Okay, yeah, here's a good point where we're going to talk about this. So the project itself and the runtime and a power operation project consists on the back end um, of various servers that are running as operational components inside of EPO, similar to the services that you have in PME with all the individual like network router and real-time service and site service and these things and log inserter. These are the main components of a PO project, and the reason why they're also able to be redundant is you can actually have them, and you can also even have them running on different servers to spread the load around. So it can be you can create quite modular system to spread your resources if you have such a huge system. So what happens is in PO you have a thing called a cluster at the top level, and everything is underneath that cluster. So C1 is the name of the cluster, and then IO server 1, alarm server 1, trend server, and report server. Basically, the project and the way that we are using EPO here, we're gonna heavily use the IO server for all the device management and communications. The alarm server is used for all the alarm tags, and then trend server a little bit, and not so much report server because we're relying on um, uh, PME to be our reporting engine. So there is a report side of things for PO, but it doesn't it's not as good as the PME side of things, which is why we have that on this project. So there's the setup editor. Application config utility. Setup wizard. Yeah. And the setup wizard. So I don't need to run this setup wizard. The setup wizard's already been run in the background. Well, I've already run it and stepped through it, but basically when we're running a project for the first time on a computer, Power Operation wants to run a setup wizard to basically understand the computer and certain settings that you want to put to that project before you go to runtime. So if you try to do a runtime, if you've compiled the project and you try to go runtime first without doing this, it'll bark at you and say, no, you need to run the setup wizard first. This has already been done. I don't need to do that again. And you guys, naturally speaking, you guys shouldn't have to run that again. But if you ever do need to, it's not a big deal. And this video would step you through understanding the setup wizard. It's a 2 minute 36-second video. It's not very long. It's just a kind of a wizard that steps you through a few settings. The backend application config utility is a good one. So this one, there's various. Let's expand all of these. Yeah. Okay. Let me click on you. So here we have the runtime Cytec server name, which is going to give you your, and we want to stick to your computer name. So that's our computer name here. You have basic reports, which again we're not using, but a one-line engine. So this is important, and what I've done in the back end is there is a SciTech user that is sort of, let's say, the management user that's called supervisor, and the password I've given to Richard before. I can give that out when needed. But basically, this is the supervisor backend level user that is needed. And if you test credentials when it's running, that's what you want to see. You want to see a successful. Oh, our operation's not running. Pretty sure it is. Yeah, it is. Okay. I think that's the test that I wanted to do, not the other one. Yes. Test site that credentials is the one we wanted to do. Um, again, these are applications that you'll probably never need to use. Just wanted to show them to you because they're there, and maybe a tech support member, if you're talking to them, might get you to go in here and check something. Okay, but only do that at their guidance or my guidance anyway. You shouldn't ever have to go in here and change things too much. Okay. Um, Basically, again, when I'm setting up a project, and those videos will go through this as well, because they're talking about doing a starting from scratch type of thing, where you're setting it up for the first time. You do have to run through a few things to make sure that the thing is operational. Like certificate management, for example, when we're talking about the web side of things, this is where we can manage that. Uh, Sort of IAS app pools, making sure that those are started and working. And there's a thing called single sign-on. Now, this is a little bit different than the single sign-on that you guys are using, which is for Windows. Remember when I talked about the thick client? There's a thick client that can also that also uses single sign-on, and that's more what this manages. So since we're using the web and the Windows users, there's not a real need to go in here and use this. Right? That's pretty much that. This other computer setup editor is a backend system that, again, I want to show you because I just want to get you to see there's a lot of power in the back end in terms of um, parameters and things we can tweak. So, when it comes to tweaking settings and, or let's say you wanted to dial back the COM settings of a specific, let's say you had a daisy chain that was sluggish to respond in real time, and you wanted to dial back the polling rate on that daisy chain, for example. This is a place you could go to do that. You can set up specific parameters for specific devices or communication links that you could specify those. There's a whole bunch of power in this, and basically these are just little, um, let's say, metadata tags that once you then save this settings file, which is called the SciTech INI file, there's one of these files that goes along with the project, and once you save this and then you recompile, rerun your project, you'll get that those settings will take effect. So there's a whole bunch of different types of parameters. We've done some minor implementations for some of these parameters, but I really haven't. I think there's a settings. Yeah, here we go. DNP. This is our DNP I had to put in a couple of these. For making a DMP work. But yeah, and again, in general, without guidance and further knowing what you want to do here, just know that this is there, but it's not something you guys will need to have to come and play with. So we want to stick to, using the studio as the best way to manage the project, and those back-end applications are good to know what's there in the back end. So again, from that Power Operation launch shortcuts window, application config utility is the thing, computer setup editor. Those are the two that I just had open. Configurator as well. This application you do need to launch from here. And this is something that I wanted to briefly touch on as well. So when we're getting into the reason why I want to mention it is because of the OPC UA side of things. So here's our OPC UA connection, and it's managed here, and the port number is managed here as well. So configuring it, I'm seeing that check mark there is all we need to know to see that it's functional. And it's working in parallel with the PO project and serving that data, all our real-time data out over OPC UA. So that's how the ETAP real-time is going to get access to, because when you guys have the ETAP up and running and we access the real-time data, it's going to access it through this OPC UA connection. And from my understanding, Richard, that's running on your own machine, right? When you run the model and you run it?
I don't know if it's actually working right now. We haven't, because we kind of
No, I
left.
know in terms of working, but in terms of when you wanted to make it work, it's going to be operational there, or is it going to be, it's not going to be running on the server, right? You won't have to remote desktop to use it, right?
No, that's not the intent. Yeah, we
Right.
run the model on our own machine.
Right. Okay. So that's the point. So the real-time this OPC UA connection, you'll gain access to the real-time data through that connection from ETAP. And yeah, we don't need to know too much about all these other things. These are just back-end things that we've again run once and made work. Encryption, okay, that's something, and it's enabled. So, basically this is allowing the HTTPS side of things to work on the website. That other deployment client thing is not needed, so we don't need to use that. Okay, I'll get into graphics editor as our graphics editor for the device diagram, the diagrams and everything. We'll get into that in a bit. Our operational runtime. Okay, so we'll get there. From the backup. That's right here, just under that little tab, and then restore, and it'll ask you with a similar dialog box, what's that CTZ file that you want to restore from. So you can browse to the backup or whatever that you wanted to restore from, and including the includes is, let's say that changed, you wanted to overwrite it. Basically, it's just going to take, because there is only one PLS includes anyway, inside of EPO. So that will just overwrite it, which is fine. And then you say, do you want to do it to the current project, which will just take effect, or to a new project? You'll probably want to always choose this because this is the only project you care about running. I use this a lot because if I ever wanted to create another folder, essentially, it's going to create a new folder with all that stuff in it. This is useful for, let's say, we wanted to share diagrams or files or things like that, and we wanted to restore a project. Again, restoring the project, all it does is it's like the unzip process. So it's taking all that stuff that's in that bundled folder, bundled file, and spitting it all out into that folder path. So that you can see that that's going to happen right here. Location. It's going to go to this users folder. I'll create a new folder for that project. So even when we restore, it hasn't compiled yet and it hasn't run yet. So I can happily restore a project to a new folder. I'll just show you that here. So I'm going to take one from a previous one, just this one from last week. Include new project. This is what I'll call it. Let's just keep it short with just a date, for example. And oh, I think it wants that whole thing. Let me do that again. Oh, this is just how it's going to restore. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so it's going to create this folder, and then I'm going to include all of these things. So restore, and it's going to ask, do you wish to recreate this directory? Yes. Okay, so all it's done is it's taken all of that from that backup and put it into this new project in my studio. It's not active, and it's not compiled yet, and it's not running as well. So that's just a good way to know that you're not breaking anything if you do a restore from a backup. But if you do overwrite, what will happen is if you chose that overwrite button, basically current project instead, which is what you want to do, it'll take this, it'll put it over top, so you won't see a new project in your list at all, and you'll see that the compiled will go unchecked because it's taken files and put it over top of what you have compiled. So when you just to rerun it, you still have your running project and it hasn't been touched yet. And when you just a two-step process of getting it to run again is to recompile it and then to run it. I'll show you the running in a second here. So there's a thing called the runtime manager. And there's, of course, our services. Just running the runtime is a matter of when you're running the studio and you go to compile, there's these two buttons here on the left-hand side called Compile Active Project and Run Active Project. So everything here at the top section before this little divider is related to like project management, you know, in terms of setup and standards, security, virtualization, system model, topology, and projects. These are all to do with project management. I'll just take this and Oh, I'll see that in a second. Um, and then there's the compile section, which is for deployment. So there's compile, run, and deployment. That's the thing that we aren't needing to do because this is going to another machine. We don't have any deployment servers. We are the deployment server. Compile is simply a button that runs the compile. So you press it, it compiles the project. And this is how you'll know if there's any errors. It'll come up with the warnings or errors, and that succeeded just fine. No errors, no warnings, nothing. So the compile will only work if it's an active project. So if you do this and you make active and then you click that compile, it will compile the active project. Okay. So anytime that you're wondering what is it doing, it's only ever compiling the active project that you have here. Okay. And then running is the big play button. This does two things from the studio. This runs the active project, and also runs the thick client over top, which is something useful that we'll need in some cases. So in terms of tag viewer and in terms of event notification management, this is a thing that we want to launch from time to time, the runtime itself. And the runtime is also able to be launched from right here. So this is a shortcut that we probably want to utilize and have from this folder, or just have it right from the desktop. And what's the runtime manager, and how is that different than the runtime? The runtime manager is like a mini version of the services, but just for the PO project itself. It's like you're only see how you see like the C1 and the alarm server, IO server, and those things. It's like you're getting a view inside the project itself and all the little apps that are running inside of it. And that's what the runtime manager is good for. There's the thick client right there, which is the runtime itself. So the runtime manager is often all I ever need to do itself to manage the project itself when we're talking, because it's running like a service right now. So the way that you can see, it says service mode. So we're not having to actively always start the project from not running to running to not running to running. Okay, so and that's obviously not what we want to do. We want it to have it always running in the background. So when you're post compile and you wanted to put that into place, as soon as you compile the project and you wanted that to go live, essentially. So let's say you've done device mapping updates, or you've done trying to think, alarm updates. It would take actually something, first of all, something to recompile. As soon as that compile button goes unchecked, because you've made a change to certain settings, that's when you know you have to recompile, and then you have to restart the runtime. So there's a big restart all button here, and that's the only thing you need to do. So the two-step process is recompile, and then come into the runtime manager and restart all. And that's like restarting your services in the back end in PME, for example.
So how is that different than the icons on the studio? I could do it through the studio as well?
Yeah, the studio just starts the runtime, but it's already started. So it doesn't, yeah, that play button basically, let me go back to it. Difference, good question. What's the difference? So the difference is this is starting the project if it's stopped, or this is launching. This is also launching that thick client window, which we will need to use sometimes. So, but this doesn't restart the project. So the restarting of the project from taking the recompiled new compile And going live with it is something you have to do because that's still something you still have to do. That button doesn't do that.
Okay.
So, so what I'm getting at is use this to launch. What I usually use that for is now to launch the thick client, or I just launch it from that shortcut. This one here, to launch the runtime thick client. The actual backend restart, I use the runtime manager for. So runtime manager, I just type in runtime manager. It it shows up here on the sys tray then, and I click restart all. So the two-step process for going from a change to compiled to run to restart is that two-step process. Recompile and open the runtime manager and hit restart.
Is there a time I might have to do a restart all independent of making changes to a project? Like, in the case of the PME, you're talking about the ION services. Sometimes
Right.
something would lock up and we'd have to restart a service.
Right. That it could be something it might be needed. Typically, again, no, but when troubleshooting, you always need to know what to do. And so this is a place also where you can see the status of them. So if there's an error, that should show up here, or if it's if it's struggling with something, there might be an error message here that's going to show up. So that's useful. And when so you can shut down all to just completely stop the project, or restart all to just kick them into restart again. So it's a good thing to come to if you wanted to check on something. Let's say you're finding the project is maybe you're not getting any real-time device communications. Maybe you've lost communications. Definitely the IO server would be the first place to check. And we'll also I'll show you where the diagnostics is for that as well. But in terms of running, making sure that the IO server is running, that's what you need to know in the back end for communications to work. Okay. If it's running, my bet is that communications should be working. And or failing the actual communications going out from the server not working. So, at that point, it's then checking, can I ping the device, or can I pull it, via its software? Can the RTAC, if it's SEL relay, can the RTAC see it? In Ion meters case, we can use Ion setup, of course. Can Ion setup see it? Or you can just ping the IP of the individual meter. Since everything on the SEL side is beyond the RTAC, we can't ping each individual relay, unfortunately. So that would be up to the RTAC level to start to troubleshoot. Like, let's say you're having an issue with getting status from one relay, but the meter's operational, then you know that in that feeder you have the relay. There's something off with its comms.